Welcome back to Hope at Night. We've been talking with Dr. Gordon Atkins on why he is inspired to take care of the earth. Our next guest is an animal lover and professor who holds a master's in biology and a PhD in Old Testament. She is here to share some thoughtful insights and practical steps on what we can do to be good stewards of our planet. Please join me in welcoming to Hope at Night Dr. Rahel Wells. Rahel, I understand you just got back from an amazing backpacking trip. Where did you go and what did you experience there?
I did. I backpacked the northern half of the Pacific Crest Trail, which goes all the way from Canada to Mexico in Washington State, so about 250 miles.
Wow. How long were you guys out there for?
It was 12 days.
12 days. Did you run into people who were also hiking the trail?
So many. So most people go north to south. We were going south to north. So we ran into all the people that were through hiking the whole thing, which means they're starting from one end and going to the other. We were just doing a section.
Okay.
So, but it was some of the most beautiful territory in the country. I mean, no cell service for 12 days, just in the mountains. We saw tons of bears and amazing animals and beautiful plants, and it was just spectacular.
12 days you were out there. You know, I've run into people who were hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. I was at a sort of a restaurant or a store, and they had just come off the trail just to pick up some supplies. And I remember talking to them, they're like, oh, I've been out here for about a month. You know, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm getting some supplies, and they were sending out some, packages to somewhere, getting stickers for their water bottle, and I asked them, I said, are you going back? They're like, yeah. I go, when are you coming out? And this was June, and they said, I'll be coming out at the end of August. Mm-hmm. I'm like, wow, you're gonna be away from civilization for that long?
That's great.
Let me ask you a question. I'm sure someone who, you know, obviously you're involved in academia, you teach, you're a professor around so many people. When you're out there, after 3 or 4 days, maybe it's a little bit longer, when does it finally start hitting you? I'm in a beautiful place. I just want to be here longer. Do you go through that experience when you're out there that long?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I mean, we have to stop and get supplies too, but it's just, to me, it's where I get the most close to God, I think. And I just feel the smallest, which for me is a good thing because it helps me to realize the bigness of the world around me and how I'm just one little piece, and yet I'm somehow important to God. I think for me, it's being out in nature like nothing else and being away from civilization that really helps me to connect with who I really am.
That's beautiful. Now you have an interesting pair of degrees. You got a degree in theology and you got a degree in biology. Why did you go that route? Is there any connection between those two degrees?
Well, I originally thought I was going to be a biologist. In fact, Dr. Atkins was one of my professors. Okay. And I still am a closet biologist. I still love biology. I still, read a lot of scientific articles. And so it was a long journey for me. I've always loved both fields. And I think really what clicked for me was that I wanted to be trained in both because we have so few people that are trained in both theology and biology, and so that I can kind of speak to the intersection between those. And one of those intersections is, of course, caring for the earth, and that's a big passion of mine. So I think those things kind of all wove together. So I just love studying both of them, and I think having that connection to both really helps me to better understand the other.
Based upon your studies and maybe, frankly, your opinion, what do you think is the current state of our planet today?
It's in trouble. I think we even see this in the Bible, actually. A lot of the Bible authors talk about the problems in the earth. So there's deforestation, there's pollution, like you mentioned at the beginning. There are animals are disappearing. There's famine, there's drought, there's hot weather. I was experiencing in Washington State 90s, almost to 100 degrees up in the mountains, which is just unheard of there. And there's tons of wildfires. In fact, I just got out of the mountains before. There's 3 or 4 wildfires now burning, and they're having to close parts of the trail. And this just is very unusual in Washington. And so, just seeing what was already a problem mentioned by the Bible writers is even more so now with the greater population we have and the things we're doing to the earth. So it's in trouble. It's struggling.
Do you think the Bible really calls us to care for the earth, to be good stewards of this planet? Or do you think, no, that's just for the biologists, right? Or do you think every person has a responsibility to this planet?
Well, as Dr. Atkins mentioned, I think God gave us that responsibility from the beginning. But I think it's actually interesting to me that all of the prophets through the Bible and all of the many places through the Bible, God mentions it again. He says this is not just what was supposed to be at the beginning, but you're supposed to still be in charge of caring for the earth. So, and it's not a dominion. Sometimes the Bible uses the word dominion, but it's not a domination, but it's a good dominion, as if you might imagine a good ruler wants to care for his subjects, right? He wants them to be happy and to be blessed.
And you're referring to the verse in the book of Genesis where it says Adam was given dominion over the earth.
Correct.
And what I'm hearing from you is not dominion in the sense of just use up and pillage the supplies and resources of this world, but to have a good relationship and to care.
Yes.
Continue.
Yes, and that is exactly Christians and people who believe in the Bible are often accused of saying, of using that verse to destroy the earth and say, it doesn't matter what we do because we have dominion. And really, the Bible there is saying, and then through the rest of the Bible, no, yes, we do have dominion, but it's supposed to be a good dominion, a dominion of care, of servant leadership, of doing what we can to make the environment work well. And then I find it interesting that even in the new earth, the Bible describes that after the end of time, when humans will be here on the earth, they're still going to be caring for the earth. So this is our responsibility throughout all of time, according to the Bible.
Wow, that's fascinating. Is there anything else besides the Garden of Eden or maybe the book of Revelation that talks about good stewardship of this planet, of this world, of land, of animals?
Yes, in fact, almost all of the laws God gives, many of them are related to making sure the earth is well and happy. And so even to the laws of domestic animals, caring for the animals that we use that are partners with us. And this would, I think, involve lots of the animals used today in experimentation and other things like that. And so we're not supposed to just destroy them. We're supposed to treat them kindly and think about their well-being. And so all through the laws, as well as the prophets and many other passages in the Bible, talk about our responsibility towards the creation and the creatures that God has made.
Rahel, what if someone says to you, wait a minute, the world's coming to an end. Why should I care about this planet?
That to me is the biggest question that I often get on this topic. Like, why should I care if the earth's going to burn up anyway at the end? Why does it matter? And I think there's a lot of answers to that. But one would be, we all know we're going to die. That doesn't mean we don't care for our bodies in the meantime, right? And try to have the best quality of life we can. That's just a simplistic answer. But I think it also goes back to what Dr. Atkins was saying, was that God has asked us to care for the earth. And this is our responsibility. So it's more than just, should I do this or not? It is our responsibility. And then thirdly, this really impacts not just the animals in creation, but it impacts other people. The famines, the droughts, the natural disasters, these affect people, they hurt people. And so even if we don't care about creation, but we care about other people, we should be caring about the environment.
And I wonder how many generations thought the end of the world was happening in their time, right? None of us knows the exact day or hour. Yeah. So we shouldn't operate with just that particular event in mind. We should operate with, hey, we're also in this present day reality.
Right.
That's fascinating. Now, here's the thing. Does this mean I have to be an activist? Does this mean I have to, tie myself to a tree, protest, and maybe stop bulldozers? What are some ways for me to be a good steward of this planet, to show that I care for this world?
Yeah, so I think, as Dr. Atkins mentioned, one of the best ways is to get out in nature yourself, right? To learn the beauties of it so that you do care about it. And then I think for me, the most important thing is to start small, because it can feel overwhelming, right? I have all these things I need to do to care for the earth. How am I supposed to do that? And so something I try to do is every month or maybe every year, do one new thing. right? So maybe I recycle this thing I wasn't recycling before. Maybe I try to use less water when I'm brushing my teeth or showering, or, maybe I'm trying to, see how I can get a car with better emissions, right? So like just small steps along the way that are meaningful. And there's plenty of lists out there. You can just Google, how do I care for the earth? And there's a zillion ways. So, just trying to start small and realizing that yes, you're one person, but if we all as one individual do things, big things happen, right? And I think, yes, some people may be called to be activists, certainly, but I don't necessarily think that is what God is calling all of us to do. But he is calling us to take responsibility where we can, each one of us.
Wow. Gordon, any contribution to that question?
It's, learning about it creates that respect, and then respect, there's a whole bunch of different ways we can all do it. So we all don't have to do it exactly the same way.
Right.
And sometimes policy starts, infringing on our rights, we think, and so forth. But if we all take that time, like Dr. Wells was saying, to just think about what can I do. A person I consider a very wise man once told me, if you're doing exactly the same thing you were doing 6 months ago, you ought to rethink things. You need to be deliberate. Take time and be deliberate about, okay, what can I do next?
Well, I really appreciate what you guys are talking about, because you're pointing out something really important, which is this idea of educating ourselves and experiencing the gift that God has given to each one of us. Imagine a world where parts of our environment are gone or missing, and that's happening currently. Something that really touches my heart, I think, is when in my lifetime we've seen the extinction of certain animal species. Some animals do not exist. I've literally witnessed that in my lifetime. And I think about some of the most beautiful animals in the world that I haven't seen yet, that are on the verge of extinction, being wiped out.
Yes.
And that's a sad reality.
It is.
Right?
But there are success stories. There are animals that were maybe on the brink, that we've taken the time as a population, not individually. But I live right next door to the Kirtland's warbler habitat. They were down to 200 pairs until the program started in the 70s, and now they're out and about in lots of places. And I take tours out there, and guaranteed to show people if you come in June. So there's also hope too.
Wow.
And that comes from people taking responsibility and saying, this matters, and I'm going to do something about it. Yeah.
There's an intentionality, right? And when you care for God's green earth, you're doing the will of God, right? Would you say that to be true?
I would. I very much would.
Is that actually, would you consider that a ministry too?
I would.
Okay.
I mean, God says at the end in Revelation, he says, I'm going to destroy those who destroy the earth. It matters to him. He loves this place. In fact, God says over and over, I love the earth. I love the land. It belongs to him, not to us. So we are his stewards of it, but it's not ours. Right. Throughout the Bible, God says, this is mine. I'm giving it to you in trust for you to care for it.
Wow. This has been amazing. I'm sure someone is watching this program and maybe thinking, man, I'm alone. What can I do? Maybe the environment around them is already falling apart. We've seen some of the things that have been taking place in some of our larger cities, and we see some habitats being destroyed right before our very eyes. What message of hope would you give to them?
I would say that actually one of the biggest things you can do, this may sound strange, but it's actually your diet. And this is something that God gives us the original diet of fruits and vegetables and grains and plant-based foods, and that's going to be the diet on the new earth as well. And that science is showing that this is actually one of the best things you can do to care for the planet. Not that it is a sin necessarily to eat meat, but just that these things are coming together in a way that we never knew. And in fact, one of the biggest contributors to the destruction of the earth and animals is diet. And so as you can see on that graph up there, of the mammals on earth, 96% are livestock and humans, and only 4% are wild mammals. And so and the 60% are livestock, right? And these are what we're growing to feed people. And so a huge contributor, and the next slide shows it with birds, I think it's like 70% of birds are chickens and other poultry, and only 30% are wild. So this is numbers, not species. And so one of the biggest contributors to the destruction of the earth, which is on the next slide, is the animal industry. So the greenhouse gas emissions, water pollution, air pollution, etc., are some of the most. Animal production contributes the most to that than anything else. So one of the biggest things we can actually do, if a person feels like, man, what can I actually do, is work on changing your diet, because this is significant. So 1 pound of meat takes, on average, 16 times more energy and land production than 1 pound of plants. And so we're using up way more of the Earth's resources than we used to be, mainly because people are eating way much more meat than they used to. So even if you just eat less, that's a huge contributor to caring for the Earth.
Wow.
So you may not feel like you're doing much, right? But just by that simple fact of changing some things in your diet, you can make a huge difference.
Wow, that's a really fascinating contribution we can make. Even just by the things we're eating,
Yes.
we can in some way contribute to the uptake of our world.
Right.
That's amazing.
And then I would also just say, don't give up and don't be discouraged. I think that's very easy for me to look at all the terrible things going around. Try to focus on some of the positive stories, right? Like Dr. Atkins mentioned, find the success stories and try to remind yourself that, I believe ultimately the earth is going to burn and we are going to go to heaven. But to try your best in the places you have and to be grateful for the gifts we do have and to try to use them wisely and kindly to the earth.
That's amazing. Any contribution?
You can do a lot to take care of the environment just in your own home.
Right.
Diet, the water you use, how you recycle. You can do a lot just in your ecosystem of your house.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a great start.
Every person can make a difference in our world, right?
Yes.
Dr. Wells, Dr. Atkins, really appreciated this discussion. It's been fascinating. I think you've really encouraged us to take some positive steps in taking care of our environment and our world. Well, it's time to go to a break, but when we come back, we'll get to hear some questions from our live audience for our guest tonight. So don't go away. Welcome back to Hope at Night. We've been talking with Dr. Gordon Atkins and Dr. Rahel Wells about our duty in taking care of our planet as citizens of this earth. I'd like to turn to our live in-studio audience. First of all, how do you react or relate to what they've shared today? Right over there.
I resonate with a lot of the topics discussed today. Climate change is a big issue lately, and I have been thinking of different ways to make changes in my own life. I love nature, but I do have a hard time connecting with it. So hearing your words of encouragement and your stories really encourages me to go out more and make some new changes.
Right. I really believe that the world can be a better place if we get out in nature more. Would you guys agree?
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Right. Anyone else? Right over there.
I found the point about how humans can change internally and how our individual diets can improve like the betterment of the world. But I was wondering, and some other people may wonder, if they're trying to wean off meat and trying to eat a more plant-based diet, but they're used to it, it can be extremely difficult. So how can we begin to eat a more plant-based diet?
That's a struggle for a lot of people, for all of us, right? Mm-hmm. Diet's a journey. Any quick tips you'd give to someone asking that question?
I think be patient with yourself. It takes time to change habits. And I mean, I've changed a lot of things in my diet over the years too. And I still long for those old things. So it's not that it just goes away, right? But sometimes stewardship requires sacrifice, right? So sometimes we make choices because we have compassion for things that we need to change rather than because it always tastes good, right? So but just be patient with yourself on that journey. It's a journey, not like suddenly you've arrived.
Right.
Little steps.
Little steps.
Yeah, little
right?
steps.
Right. That's right. You can achieve something sustainable by these little steps, right?
Yep. If you try to do everything all at once, it's just not going to work.
Right. You'll swing like a pendulum.
You're going to fail, and then you give up. And yeah,
right.
So,
right. Fantastic. Well, let's take some questions from our audience. Do we have any other questions? Right over there.
I just have a question really for both of you. Given your firsthand experience in nature, either growing up next to a forest in your own backyard or on the hiking trail, what climate change effects have you seen firsthand over the years?
Well, one of the things that I've been doing research on for quite a while is with gulls out in gull colonies. Now, why do you care about gulls? They just poop on your cars. But they live in large colonies. They're actually easy to observe because of that. And so over the years, we've been studying their reproductive behavior and their success. And in one of the sites that we've been working on, the records of when the eggs were laid and when they hatched have changed by 3.5 weeks. So they're laying 3.5 weeks earlier. And with climate change, we've noticed this migration is happening earlier generally, and when they're laying eggs. The problem is when you lay that early, you're bound to have a couple of nights where it gets really cold still, okay? It's not just uniformly warmer all the time. You get these fluctuations. So when they nest earlier and they have those cold nights and the adults aren't able to incubate the eggs well enough, and the whole colony can die off. We've had 3 of the last 4 years, this large colony of 10,000 gulls had 0 success rate.
Wow. So
one year worked because we didn't have the cold weather, but yeah, by nesting earlier, it puts them at greater risk for the extremes and the temperature changes during transitions of seasons.
So there's been the diminishing of the population of these gulls.
Certainly for some years. Now, gulls live for 25 years, so they have several chances to lay eggs and have offspring, but there have been some really serious downturns at times that are related to this whole changing climate.
How about you, Dr. Wells?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, but I'll just mention one in my own personal life. I've lived in basically the same place for my entire life, for decades. And just when, as a kid, you had snow starting in, October, maybe even September, and it would go all the way till April. Now we are lucky to get snow in January and February, and that's it. And like many of the plans we'll make for sledding parties and things, we have to cancel them because there's no snow. So we just have a lot of ice and rain, and it feels more like I used to go down to Tennessee for Christmas. It feels like living in Tennessee, honestly, in Michigan now. So just seeing that personal difference, and it's not just 1 year; it's over decades that this has just been shifting. And
yeah, we've noticed that in California as well. We plan various events and other things, and now we've had to shift things just in the last few years because there's been dramatic changes in just the timing of these seasons.
Oh.
It's really interesting. Any other questions? Right over there.
Yes, doctors, thank you. Seems like the longer I live, the more I know, the more I want to learn more about it. And I wanted to know, why wouldn't something as important as the environment be important to other people?
It's a good question. I actually think it is important to everyone. And to me, that's been the challenge and also the joy of trying to say, how can I help? How can I get to know this person so that I can know what's important to them, and then connect it to the environment and show them how the environment really does impact them. So rather than trying to ram something down someone's throat and say, this is important, you need to believe it, I think actually we all do. It's just what angle, right? So if you can really get to know people and help them understand, oh, actually the environment does impact you in this way, that's an entering wedge into having that conversation. And so unfortunately, I think, often other things impact people and they have certain views, and then they take that view and apply it here, and it may not necessarily apply there, right? So people tend to like their opinions, and that's a good thing. So how can we bridge those gaps without offending people and help them to see they actually do care about it? Just finding that way in which they do, and then you can build a relationship rather than an enemy.
Dr. Wells, I think you're really touching on a nerve here that's really important, and that is, do we take the top-down approach or do we take the bottom-up approach in working with people? And what you're pointing out is, look, every person has a relationship to this world, whether they know it or not.
Yeah.
And it's helping them to see what that is and then help them to recognize their responsibility.
Right.
Wow. I wish there were more people like you in our world today.
It's been a journey for me. I haven't always felt that way.
Right,
So it's just realizing that doesn't work. So how can I find ways to connect people with people in other ways?
Yeah, and I think it really shows a deep understanding of humanity, right? Wow. Great question. Any other questions? Right over there.
This question was inspired by something Dr. Atkins said. When you see the kids, they're married to their electronics. How do you get them to put that down and get out and smell the roses?
Well, have a big storm, the power goes out, and cell phones don't work. But that shows how connected they are, because what do I do about that? I think the key is taking them out and leading them through one of those discovery experiences. Now, I may know what's there already, but I can take them out and they say, wow, it might be through a microscope, it might be through, the favorite one is the field telescope. Just set it up on a tripod, on an owl, on a nest way over there. They just see it as the woods. But they look in that and I was like, whoa. And so providing different experiences. Now, it's hard to pull them away from one, and actually going on campouts are a great way, something like a long hike like that. It takes a couple of days, really, for the kind of to forget the rush you were in and the technology you had, till you can really start to notice things. So helping people notice things and have those sort of aha discovery moments, I think, is one step.
Yeah, and what you're pointing out is it's about experiences.
Right.
We've got to provide experiences, not just something that they're watching, but for them to physically immerse themselves in that.
Right, and it's harder. Like I was saying, as a kid, I was playing in the spare lot. It's not safe to play in the spare lot anymore in many places, and so it's not just parents' faults. It's a whole experience. We're experiencing the outdoors differently, so we have to be deliberate, and being deliberate in providing those moments, I think, can go a long way.
Yeah, I would just add to, like you're mentioning, go with them, right? Build a relationship with them and then go with them. And when you enjoy it, then they'll do it with you and enjoy it. I work with kids at my church, and I think that's been the key for me, is not just saying you should go outside, but go with them, right? Experience that with them, and that helps them to see, wow, this is really cool.
Well, I know this to be true, Dr. Wells. You may not know this, but I actually have a friend who went with you and your husband and maybe some others on a camping trip, and it blessed them, it changed them. And they told me about it. They're like, I went on this amazing trip. I really enjoyed it. It was life-changing for them. So thank you again.
Definitely.
Cool. Anyone else? Any other questions? Right over there.
Hi. So, at least personally, I used to have a vegan diet, and all of the time I'd hear, you're not eating meat. How are you really getting your protein in? Which was something that I personally struggled with. And I know you've been hiking and you've been doing it on a plant-based diet. I was wondering if you had any tips for hiking on a plant-based diet, since you're not eating the meat or getting that protein in.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's thank you for your question. I think it's, different people work with different diets differently. And so you have to figure out what works for you for all the macronutrients that you need in your body. So I'm not trying to say that what I'm doing is good for someone else, right? But I think what's interesting to me is, of course, animals all get their protein from plants. So we have, in fact, some plant sources have more protein that we absorb than animal sources do. So it's just finding ones that work for you. So I eat a lot of, like soy-based products, which have a lot of protein in them. And I try to be strict vegan at home, but I'm not on the trail. Sometimes I have to have something else. So I'll eat some cheese or something like that, but I try to eat it as, as healthy type of cheese as possible. But I'm eating a lot of beans, a lot of rice, a lot of, grains, a lot of, I don't get as many fruits and vegetables, obviously. So I eat them dried. So I usually put dried stuff in my bean mixes, etc. So, but I eat a lot of calories. So when I'm hiking 20 miles a day, I'm eating probably 4,000 calories a day. So, it's just taking a lot of food with me. So different.
I got to ask you, how much does your backpack weigh on trips like that?
Well, we do have some resupplies, so we try to plan on density of food, so a lot of nut butters and things like that, right, which also have a lot of protein. So 2 pounds per day of food. So, but I try to take really light of everything else. So I'm maybe around 25 pounds.
Okay. Wow.
So there are ways to do it. There's actually great books out there, vegetarian backpacking books, tons of recipes. I use some of those.
Great. Any other questions? Right over there.
Yes. Have you ever found yourself in a conflict between your faith and science?
For me, it's very interesting. I have had less conflict in myself, maybe, than otherwise. I think my personal struggle with God has always been to believe that he loves me or not. Not so much, do I believe that he's real? Do I believe that he exists? Do I believe that he created the world and wrote the Bible? So I've not had as much personal struggle with that. But I've had struggles with other people where I've had to say, I am choosing to be in relationship with this person rather than be right. So I think that's been the biggest struggle for me, is how do I navigate my relationships with other people who disagree with me, both in science and in theology, and to do that well and kindly and compassionately. And I think that's been a struggle and a journey I'm still on. So I think that's more where my struggle lies. I don't have a problem with having questions. In fact, I learned this from Dr. Atkins, actually. One of my mentors in life is just, it's okay to have questions, and that's part of the joy. I don't have to have all the answers, right? I can seek to keep learning and discovering, and it's okay to not know everything. And so in the area of science and faith, we often don't know everything, and that's okay. And it's okay to sit in that place of not knowing.
Mm-hmm. And I'm hearing this humility that is part of this journey of learning and growing and communicating, and I think that really disarms people, who may disagree with us when they recognize, hey, look, I'm being honest, I don't know everything there is, but this is what I've learned so far.
We're not done.
We're not done yet.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. Science is a journey of discovery and investigation. Right.
So is theology.
Right.
So studying
exactly
the
right.
Bible. So
many times in our experience, we think we've arrived. We've gained enough knowledge, enough wisdom here, enough experience, and we miss out and we rob ourselves of so much more we can learn and experience.
Sure.
Things have shaped our views. I'm sure, Dr. Atkins, not saying you're an old man, you're an older gentleman though, but I'm sure throughout your life you've experienced great changes and shifts in your belief about so many things.
Yeah, we often refer to these as paradigm shifts, where this was sort of the way we thought, and now we're going a different direction. And yeah, theology and science are still learning, and by definition, if we don't know everything in theology and we don't know everything in science yet, then there must be questions.
Right.
But questions aren't a bad thing. It's what's predicted if we're at this state. And we won't get to the end because that's God. God knows it all.
Right.
And so we're going to have questions, and that's part of the challenge of discovery that we talked about earlier. Just keep working forward.
I always say this: God wouldn't promise eternity if he didn't have an eternity worth of things for us to experience.
Exactly. I tell my students that you're going to be in school the rest of your life.
Right.
What?
Right.
They catch on to it.
Right. Fantastic. Any other questions? Right over there.
You've talked about how we can, as a population, adjust ourselves so we don't have as much impact on the earth. But what about the urbanization or consumption of the land by the population itself? We're consuming our land by overdeveloping cities, and the urban sprawl is happening out into the farmland and into the natural areas, and we don't have many parks left because we're consuming our land due to population growth. Can you address those issues?
Yeah, that's such a tough question. I think it's true, and I think we talked about that a little bit earlier, just how You know, the fact that we have so many more people, the impacts of our choices matter more, I think. And so, you know, that is why maybe we have an even greater responsibility, because there are so many of us, and there is just going to be a natural impact of the vast masses of people that are going to be more impactful than it was even just 100 years ago. So therefore, we do have a greater responsibility in our individual lives and what we choose to do, what we choose to eat, what we choose to consume than maybe we did before. Right. And so, but I agree, it's a problem, and I don't know. You know, I think diet is a big part of that. Like the majority of the land that we're using that would otherwise be natural land is being used to feed animals. And so that's part of it, but it's definitely not all of it.
Right.
And so there are choices that we make. Maybe we choose to let some of our land go to, you know, like my husband and I are actually making a small butterfly garden in our yard because we're in a subdivision, and what can we do to help insects? Insects are in huge trouble around the world right now. There's many fewer of them than there used to be, and so providing spaces for them to eat food. And so just little things that we can do even in our spaces to help make a difference.
Dr. Atkins?
Well, I think Dr. Wells has clearly defined this, that when we have these high density locations in our big urban areas, you know, what everybody does with their water, for example, is going to have much more of an impact than someone in a rural area with the local pond kind of thing. So, you know, well, then maybe we shouldn't have urban areas and we spread everybody out. Well, then that's going to have an impact on a bigger area. So the human population that we have now is just making it much more difficult to deal with our past and deal with our present. So it's certainly complicated, and our own decisions mean more. You know, you may feel like you yourself you don't have much of an impact on the big picture, but in our high density areas, you do have an impact, and if we all took that seriously, it could make a difference.
Right, and the message I'm getting here is that every person really does matter in the scheme of all of this. And if no one believes that, then nothing will ever change. Right, and it starts with the individual, right?
You know, there's that phrase, I hope I get it right, you can't change the world, but you can make a world of change for someone.
Yeah.
So you can apply that to the ecosystem as well. And you know, your part can make a difference in your home, in your community.
That's right, and from there's a ripple effect to the rest of the world.
You can't change the overpopulation, right? You can't make, it can be discouraging, but if you can make changes yourself, you can feel like, wow, I'm actually doing something, and that can be encouraging in your own heart.
Fantastic. Appreciate this discussion, Dr. Wells, Dr. Atkins. It's been insightful, very educational, and I think very inspiring. You've encouraged all of us to get out in nature some more. Not just to experience nature, but to appreciate all that we've been given. Taking care of the earth is not something we tend to talk about. But unless you believe that we can make Mars habitable, for now, there is no planet B in the universe. I've been inspired to see how we have a responsibility and a mandate to take care of the earth, not just as citizens of this planet, but also as God-appointed stewards of His creation. How about you? Share your thoughts with us on Facebook at Hope at Night, and be sure to check out our website at hopetv.org/hopeatnight to view any of our past episodes or for more information. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time on Hope at Night.